Welcome to the Two Chumps Football Podcast. Chad Wilson and Emil Chad here with you. Pleased to be here with you. We are into week 6 of the football season. It's week 6 college football, week 5 NFL, and we're having loads of fun with it. Speaking of fun, my man Emil Chad was perfect last week. I told you you'd get off the schneid. 6-0, 3-0 college football, 3-0 in the NFL. So let me give him his flowers. I lost one game, came in second. I love it though. 11-1.
You did it on Thursday Night Football.
I messed around with a Thursday night football.
So wait, I'm good at math. 6-0. What's 6-0 and 5-1?
That's 11-1, babe.
That's a broke bookie.
That's a busted bookie. And if we caused you to lose your guy, just got to go find a new one or head on over to Bovada Sportsbook, the #1 sports book online. That's right. I said it. It's not FanDuel. It's not DraftKings. It is Bovada Sportsbook. So jump on with the sponsor and also subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, which is, by the way, Emil, where a majority of our viewers and listeners are coming from at the moment. We appreciate you guys tuning in to us every week. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next 6-0 weekend from my partner, Emil, here.
Don't put that on me.
Yeah, well, you know, you're hot. When you're hot, you're hot. And if you prefer to listen to us, as you may be doing right now on a podcast, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Amazon, you know, Amazon's into everything. They can't let anyone have anything for themselves. If you're listening to us on any one of those platforms, go ahead and hit the subscribe button right now. We promise you won't regret it. All right, let's jump into some things, Emil. It's a football podcast, man, but I want to start off with this because this infuriated me. You know, I had some thoughts on it when you first presented it to me years ago. This involved your team. And it's kind of I don't want to say it's a common thing. There's some uncommon things that went on here, but it's common in the sense of athlete getting accused of some sexual malfeasance, if I can use that word.
Yes.
And Trevor Bauer would have been one of the biggest examples of that, both in, stature, $100 million pitcher. Can I safely say that? Close to it?
He was a 3-year, $90 million deal. He literally pitched half of the first season for the Dodgers. I think they got about $10 million back when he was on administrative leave. Essentially, Trevor Bauer got $80 million to pitch half a season for the Dodgers.
And if you just leave the story there, it seems like, man, the Dodgers got fleeced, but perhaps the Dodgers jumped the gun. I'm going to let Emil get into this because Trevor Bauer did a smart thing. He went after the young lady that accused him and realizing that in this situation, man, trying to get money out of someone in this situation is like squeezing blood out of a stone. What he did do was reach an agreement that would allow him to clear his name, meaning he was able to get the information that would otherwise be redacted or hidden from the public, and he's been able to put it out there, and he had a very good Instagram post.
For people who didn't follow the story, because we're a football podcast and we're talking about sports here, a little bit baseball, let's recap. Number one, full disclosure, I'm a Dodger fan. I'm not a huge Trevor Bauer fan even before. If he pitched well for them, I would like his game, but I'm not a fan. He does a little bit too much theatrics for me. That said, we go back to May of 2021. He was accused of an incident in May of 2021, around June of 2021. He had sexual relations with a young lady that he met in San Diego. She drove up. It's an hour and a half drive without traffic. They had some weird sex, let's put it that way, allegedly choking and, consensual. That was what his take was. She came back a second time, okay?
Now, was that information, as I have some technical difficulties here, but was that information available?
Yes, she did come back a second time. And if you recall at the time, he was never charged. The DA's office did a 2 to 3 month investigation. He was never charged with the crime. And you would think the story would end there, but the age we live in, because he was accused of something, he was immediately put on administrative leave by the Dodgers. He was suspended by Major League Baseball. I think all total between ministry, the suspension was like a year. So give or half a year, I forget. Long and short was, I think he's pitching over in the Far East.
Japan, I
Or
want to say
did.
something like that.
So, this guy, at least for a good portion of time, lost his major league career, and who knows if he'll be back. So if the story ended there, it'd be sad. But like you said, Bauer went after. He filed a suit saying, "Listen, I didn't do anything here. In other words, all this was consensual. There was nothing. She was fine when she left my place." He got the text messages.
Oh, the dreaded text messages.
The text messages basically have her. I believe that she was texting with a pitcher from the Padres she knew, and another young lady saying, "Hey, it said something like, this dude's worth $51 million. You got to get the bag." She said, "I'm going to get the bag. I'm going full on."
You're missing a very important part. The young lady was her sponsor.
Yes, her AA sponsor. That's right. And in
Egging
all
her
this,
on.
she said, I'm going to get the bag. I'm going full on horror if I have to. Okay, this is not
quote,
me.
The sponsor said, quote, "Girl, you better secure the bag." What type of sponsor is that?
What type of sponsor? Right. So she also, in these text messages that he got, had a video of herself in bed the day the alleged incidents occurred, where she was
the morning
up.
after, essentially.
The morning after, he's sleeping. You can see him next to her, sleeping under the covers.
Eye mask on and everything.
Oh yeah, he was full on. Yeah, that's a whole other story. He had his eye mask on. Yeah, she's taking pictures of her. There wasn't a scratch on this girl's face.
No, and she seemed fine, emotionally.
She was
physically.
Can I even say she was beaming?
Yeah, she had that glow. She had that morning after glow.
And I'm laughing. It's actually not a laughing matter, but it's scary to me, because we're in this age of, you make an accusation like this, and immediately, instead of saying, "Okay, stop, we have an accusation, let's investigate," we immediately make the person guilty, tarnish their name. And listen, I'm not saying that this guy's not a weird guy, but if being weird was a problem, there wouldn't be anybody playing sports. Okay, there's a lot of weird people.
It'd be a heck of a lot less pitchers in baseball, because they tend to be weird birds. It's a pressure-packed position to play in sports. Yeah. It's very pressure-packed, so you're going to get different kind of people there. Emil, this really, really bugs me, because we should be in a situation now where when someone is discovered to have done this, the worst that happens to them is that they don't get their money that they were out for, or their case gets dismissed. And maybe for half a day or 24 hours, their name is tarnished and they just hide. They can hide for 30 to 60 days. And all is well. People forget a whole bunch of things happen in 30 to 60 days. I think we've reached the point now when we have a situation, especially like this one, that person should serve some time. I understand that we don't want to be a deterrent to young women that find themselves in this situation. And if there's, if we start saying, "Oh, you can go to jail if this is found wrong, blah, blah, blah," we may deter possibly young women from coming forth. I'm beyond that, because we need now a deterrent from women doing this. Sometimes for them, it's not even about the criminal case. It's about being able to make that accusation and tarnish someone who's in the public eye to get money out of them in a settlement. And man, you got to start serving some time. You got to start.
Well, the final, and I didn't understand the one part of this, so I'm just going to say what I read. I don't know. But at the end, basically, they sued one another in civil court. After all this came out, they reached an agreement, her people with his, that neither party would exchange any money.
Oh.
And he never cared about the money. What he cared about was
why would he? He's an $80-90 million guy. What's he going to get from her?
He retained his right, though, to speak on the matter. That's what he wanted, and disclose this stuff so he could clear his name. And somewhere at the end, it said she got $300,000 from her insurance company. I don't know what that meant. I don't know what they were talking about. And I'm assuming if that did happen, it's so she could pay her lawyers who wasted their time.
So she's kind of incentivized to do something like this. No loss. I took a chance. It didn't happen. Whatever. That's like going ham on a lotto.
So let's look at this list though of people here. Okay, over the years, we have the Michael Irvin, Eric Williams case back in the 90s,
Sure.
right? We have the Duke lacrosse case, famously.
Yes.
Matter of fact, the young lady who accused them and ruined their senior season, which was canceled, their names, she ended up doing jail time, if I'm not mistaken.
For this?
On the Duke lacrosse case, I think she did some time. I'm not 100% on that.
Wait, what? Perjury? What'd she do? 90 days?
I don't know, but I could almost, because I just had watched something about that a year and a half ago, and I could swear she did time. Here's another case where, again, I'm not saying Bauer and her did not engage in some weird stuff, but there's no
Consensual.
criminal charges here. Yeah, there's no
consensual,
criminal
whatever it
charges.
was. She certainly looked like it was
Yeah.
the day after. I mean, this is disgusting, and I'm over it, man. Start handing out some time to people that do this. I think that will nip it in the bud, and we could stop getting guys tarnished like this. Now, of course, if you did do the deed, yeah, you should get punished, and guys have gotten punished to the full extent of the law. I've seen people so far as say, any individual, young lady typically, that engages in this should get the amount of time that the male would have gotten had he committed the actual
Well, let's look
deed.
staying on before we get on to football. Staying with that, Julio Urias from the Dodgers is really charged with something pretty heinous, and there's video of it from what I understand. And he's getting charged with a crime.
Mhm.
He'll never pitch for the Dodgers again, and he may never pitch in Major League Baseball again. And based on what I've read about the video, and I mean, he put a hurting on a girl. He shouldn't. He should never be allowed. I mean, I'm fine with it. So I don't want
Well,
people to mistake.
that's like physical abuse. This is where we're
Yes,
walking into a different realm here.
yes.
And certainly easier to prove, I would guess, bruising, all that good stuff. But
But that's what was alleged here too. There was alleged
so the
injuries here.
bizarre sex came with,
Yes, the punching and everything.
oh,
And
that's right. That's right. She did say, I need daddy to choke me out.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
that's what she
folks out
said.
there, listen, we're paraphrasing, we're piecing it together, but I would urge you, with a little bit of free time that you have, and you have free time, go look up Trevor Bauer's situation, see what he posted on his Instagram page, and read the caption that summarizes everything that went on
And
there.
he does a video, and he actually puts up the actual text messages. You can read them yourself.
Yeah, it's like
And
a mini Dateline, and I think you guys
draw your own conclusion. He's a smart guy, by the way. He's
there's only
a
one
high IQ.
Yeah,
High
it's
IQ
one
guy.
conclusion to come to here, that this chick's a scumbag, and she probably won't stop doing this. So that's that. Let's get to football. Monday night, Emil. I'm gonna say, full disclosure, I liked Daniel Jones coming out of college. Came from one of those schools where you don't have supreme talent at your skill positions to throw to. I think he was a 3-4 year starter for the Duke Blue Devils, and he checked off all the boxes that I have known to be true for guys that are successful in this league. What has happened to him is he's gone to a Giants football team that's not in its heyday. This is not the Eli Manning or the Phil Simms New York Giants. He's had some decent defenses there. He has not had what I would say top of the line reliable wide receivers. Certainly not throwing to the type of guys that maybe a Joe Burrow or maybe some of the guys that a Patrick Mahomes has had, or a Devontae Adams like what Aaron Rodgers has had. And so he's been lacking in that. And this year, he's definitely in that situation. I mean, I would urge anyone listening to this right now, name me a New York Giants wide receiver. Quick. 10 seconds. You can't do it. But it goes a little deeper than this. I'm watching this guy, Emil. I think it's been a long time since I've seen a quarterback lacking the amount of confidence that I saw Daniel Jones lacking towards the end of that game.
Well, he's punch drunk. It's funny you mentioned this. I was having this conversation today with one of my friends who's a big Giants fan, and played football at a 1AA level, and he agrees. I mean, you can't take that many sacks. Eventually, it's like anything else; it wears on you. It's like a boxing match where a guy keeps hitting you hitting you in the ribs. Eventually, he gets your hands down and bang, you're out. And I mean,
Yeah, you
this
get the
guy's
knockout
taking,
blow. I
yeah, this
felt
guy's
like on
taking
the
from,
97-yard interception throw,
yeah,
he threw it with like with no hopes of completing that pass. I'm gonna
no
just
conviction. There was no conviction. In
none
other words,
whatsoever.
none.
None whatsoever. He just threw it out there, and it was like his first day playing quarterback. And it's just crazy to see that happening. And I'm just wondering, I know when I dig into this scheme, because you watch a television copy, and there's only so much you're going to see. You can't see the routes down the field. I'm willing to bet when I dig into this, that's going to be a big part of the problem. You've got a lot of routes going downfield. You don't have receivers that can get separation. I know on a few of those where they show, Monday Night Football is good for having more cameras than a normal football game.
Sure.
So they give you that. I don't know what the view is with the cam that
I know
hangs.
what you mean with the thing that the camera that's above the field.
And one of the interceptions that he had, Emil, everyone was covered, even by NFL standards. And the guy's getting beat to death, and he just got the ball out of his hand and he threw it to a guy. I'm willing to bet there's a schematic problem, which no one will talk about because it's Brian Daboll, the guy that got Josh Allen to do XYZ.
There's a couple things I think fans don't piece together, right? What you're basically saying is a lot of this fits together like a jigsaw puzzle. You can have an average to slightly below average pass pro offensive line if you've got receivers that get separation because the ball can come out quicker because the window opens up quicker, right? Conversely, if you don't have great receivers, if you have a great pass pro offensive line, you don't necessarily need great receivers because you get an extra half a tick back there to get separation.
Sure.
They've got two things going on. They're below average in pass protection and they don't get separation. So
It's
you've
a
got a
deadly
guy,
combo.
he's taken 18 sacks in 2 games. The Cowboy game and the Seahawks game, this guy got sacked 18 times in 2 games.
And it's frustrating for me to see because I know this guy's career is dying. If he leaves the Giants, I almost want to say when he leaves the Giants, he won't be looked at as a franchise quarterback ever in this league. Something wild will have to happen. He'll have to go somewhere, and there'll have to be multiple injuries or injuries to the starter for an extreme amount of period of time for him to have that opportunity, and he must shine immediately in it. So his career has been trashed. And
let's look at Jared Goff. I mean, Goff left the Rams, and no one considered him at that point. They said Sean McVay quit on him, went and got Matt Stafford, and they won a Super Bowl. But Goff rehabilitated his career here in Detroit.
Here's the difference. Here's the difference. He went to a Super Bowl, so he was given an opportunity just from that to be a starter immediately somewhere. I don't envision that happening for a Daniel Jones. I can't think off the top of my head right now that any franchise that would take him right now and say, you're our starter and go. They just won't, simply because of how he's looked, the optics of how he has looked.
I'll be curious when you watch the 22 film if you see something schematically, because to me it's like if I'm looking at the way the problems they have, I've got to get creative with motion. I've got to leave a tight end or a back in all the time. I've got
to throw screens. I've got to throw shallow routes. I've got to scheme Darren Waller open because he's our marquee guy. I've got to do something. I've got to actually step outside of my scheme. And sometimes a coach is too rigid in his scheme. And that is even when he doesn't have the necessary players to run that particular scheme. It's like coming in and running a wishbone and you don't have a fullback on the roster. You're just not going to be good running that. And some guys are so scheme rigid and they don't have it, and it falls on a guy it shouldn't fall on. I'm willing to bet, and I'm going to let you guys know next week when we watch the show, that a lot of the problem is scheme, or it just might be me trying to save face on. I think Daniel Jones was a great.
I have one of these fleeting thoughts too I wanted to ask you about, since you're talking about watching film. Why does everybody, and I ask you this every year because every year I hear these things quoted and I don't know where they come from. Why does everybody go to this Pro Football Focus, these broadcasters?
You're trying to rile me up. That's what you're doing. Because
no, you know why? I'm going to
give you a specific. The worst.
Listen, I'm going to give you a specific reason, and then you can comment. Okay, they keep using the term, especially on Eagle games. the best offensive line in the NFL. Now, they may have the best run blocking line in the league. I don't know. I can't comment to that. But I know one thing. Jalen Hurts is a very mobile quarterback.
Sure.
A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith get plenty of separation.
Sure.
And Hurts has been dropped 19 times in 4 games. Okay. So you're not going to convince me that you got the best offensive line, according to Pro Football Focus, in the NFL under those conditions.
Emil, I will say this. For what it is, Pro Football Focus professes to be able to do. They would have to have every offensive call that was made. They'll have to know every play. Not only will they have to know every play, they would have to know everyone's assignment on every play that was called in a game. And they would have to do the same thing on the defensive side. They don't have that. No coach would release that to them. They just don't have access to that information. And as such, they cannot do what it is that they say that they do. And Pro Football Focus pisses me off the most because it's the worst on defensive backs. They literally tag all completions to defensive backs. Linebackers get to go scot-free. They don't know the coverage. They don't know the assignments. They don't know the responsibilities. And they're out here throwing these grades, and certain guys get screwed on it. And fans take this and run with it because we love numbers. We love analytics. That's our thing now. And it makes the common fan feel smart because they can go quote numbers from Pro Football Focus.
But I mean, like, even DBs, I mean, how about offensive line play? How do I grade the guard depending on the blocking scheme? And if I don't know the blocking scheme, how do I know?
Perhaps I was supposed to pass that guy off to the tackle and the tackle didn't show up. I get the sack. Like, it's nonsense, but people love it. They run to it. And it's really hard now to have any kind of a conversation with a fan when they start quoting Pro Football Focus like they're the gods of football. And if one of these fans that believe in Pro Football Focus, listen to what I just told you. They would have to know every play call and know the assignment. They would essentially have to be a coach on the staff. The only way I would believe Pro Football Focus is if the entire staff was built of people that were on the teams at the time the game was played, because that's the only one who really knows.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well, I went off.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I went off point a little bit because you were talking about watching the Giants game. So continue on with our next topic.
Well, we're speaking of schematics. I'm going to touch on a topic that is near and dear to your heart, Emil, and that is USC's defense. Not only were you going ape shit, if I could use that term, in their win over Colorado, but I've just seen it constantly on social media since Saturday about USC's defense, about Alex Grinch, and Lincoln.
It's not just the gross numbers, pardon the pun, because they were gross. It's if you watch enough football, right? Over the years, you get to a certain age, you've seen enough, right? There's things that happen in their games, especially late third to fourth quarters. It's consistent. They get sloppy. They go from first quarter, it's okay. They're making tackles. And as the game wears on, I don't know if they're not doing a good job of conveying to these kids to maintain focus. I understand it's a human thing, but when USC is in a game and they're up 48-21 with 2 minutes left in the third.
Yeah.
I'm not expecting to recover an onside kick with a minute left. And I have to wonder, part of it, sure, I'm at the easy low-hanging fruit is the defensive coordinator Grinch. He does some weird things, but a lot of this is missed tackles. It's just sloppiness, and to me, it's a top-down program thing. In other words, you remember Nick Saban famously a few years ago, they were beating Arkansas or somebody like 55-32, and he came off the field screaming at his defensive backs who gave up a bunch of garbage yards, because that's Nick Saban. Right. In other words, and I don't see that necessarily here. It's almost like, oh, okay, we're up 4 scores, so we can be sloppy now. We can miss tackles. And you have some good points that, I'll bring up and let you go on them. Part of it, too, is, and I love Lincoln Riley. I think he's a very good coach, but he, at some point, he's young. He's 40. It's only his 7th year. If he doesn't start managing his entire program, I'm worried he's never going to win a championship, because he doesn't help. And you had this point, and we were talking about it before the show started. He doesn't help his defense with the way he calls the game.
Well, I've got a number of points here. One thing that, I've been big on for years is these offensive play callers. These guys that are, you've been hired as a head coach. You don't want to get an offensive coordinator. You want to coordinate the offense. You want to make the game plan. You want to call the plays on game day. And as such, your program suffers. You're not a program coach. You're not a CEO of a program. So certain things start to suffer. That could be the strength and conditioning. That could be simple discipline. That could be interpersonal relationships with coaches on the staff. These things get missed because you're buried in your play sheet and trying to put together plays to go beat someone on a Saturday. So you're just too much on one thing. The other thing is when you get these offensive play calling coaches, it tends to be about offense. And so the practices aren't set up in a physical kind of way. I'm yet to find one of those guys that will allow practice to be physical. You cannot touch the quarterback in any way, shape, or form. So the only time they get any kind of contact or hint of contact is in live action. Your defense learns how to just allow plays to happen in front of them, because the success of a play needs to be rehearsed against air pretty much. They'll get mad at a defensive back or a linebacker for making a play on the ball. And yes, okay, maybe that allows your offense to flow or whatever the case may be. What it does, though, on the defensive side is it starts a habit. And you'll notice that these kind of teams aren't very good at tackling. Sometimes they lack effort because in practice, they're kind of not encouraged or incentivized to run to the football. And they're just not going to be that kind of a football team. And what these guys tend to think is, well, we'll just outscore any problem that we have. Some of them, like a la Dan Mullen, I don't really need to recruit like that. My plays work no matter who's running them. I can get a quarterback that's a 3-star. I don't have to have top of the line wide receivers. We'll cross people up and get guys open.
Well, you brought up something to me years ago. I remember you telling me this, and I never really. It's obvious when you said it, but you don't think about it. Football is one of those sports. Well, every sport is, but football especially because of the intensity. When you lose focus in the center of a game, it's almost impossible to get it back. So, like Saturday was a good example. I mean, USC dominated Colorado for 3 quarters. I mean, it scores 48-21, but at some point in there, they were on the bus ready to go back to the airport. The other team wasn't.
Yeah, it was another ho-hum win. And, kudos to Deion Sanders. If there's one thing he's shown is that it's not all glitz and glamour, as some people have tried to say. He has taught his team something about believing, grit, and a never say die attitude. And we know what that thing.
They kept playing. And
there's time on the clock. Let's keep going.
When you lose that focus with 16, 17 minutes left in a game, you're going to have one of those games where you get your ass beat because you stop playing. And I mean, that's my biggest concern. Listen, I understand they're never going to be Alabama. If they're winning games 52-28 and the defense is at least a deterrent, I'm fine with that. But I don't like when I see that kind of sloppiness. That stuff drives me crazy because you can control your effort in anything you do in life. You can always try.
Yeah,
you might not be good at it, but you can try. Lack of effort in the fourth quarter of that game.
I feel you on those things. And, aside from the lack of, physicality that comes with this, there's also going to be, sometimes you can have a conditioning issue. And, all of these things start to come into play. And lo and behold, Emil, I hear you saying how, you don't need the defense to be stoppers or, they don't need to go out and crush people. Ultimately, you run into a team that wants to be super physical. And when you run into those type of teams, well, then that's when the big loss happens because your offense is just not always going to work. You're going to run into a team that just is super physical, and now you need your defense to make some stops. You need your defense to make some plays, and then you're not able to get it. So you just get a team that's just not very physical, and when they run into a team that is physical, and an Oregon State this year, or Utah, or maybe someone out of the Big Ten if they make it to,
How
college.
about a Notre Dame in 2 weeks?
Or, yeah, I just don't know if Notre Dame can return enough firepower. But you run into a team that has enough offense to go with their physicality, and you run into a really bad night. You just can't
Well,
beat
and I think what's
one-sided.
happening, I think they're also in a time, and this is a dangerous, and I'm not comparing Lincoln to Clay Helton. Lincoln's a really good coach. I think he's got a little bit of seasoning, and I hope he figures out some of the things that you're talking about. But you remember those 2 years when Clay Helton had Sam Darnold, and for whatever you want to say about Darnold as a pro, he was a fantastic college quarterback, made a few too many mistakes, but at the end of the day, he masked things that were going on with Clay.
Yeah.
And and I think now they've got a guy who's 5 steps above that. This guy is a unicorn. He, a guy who comes around every 20 years, I think, at the college level, and I think he's gonna be. And like you're able to get away with things, and I think there's a little bit of that on that team. It's like, oh yeah, well, if we screw it up, it doesn't matter. Caleb will bail us out.
Here's the one thing I've noticed throughout time. And you're a big Pac-12 fan. I've obviously been a Pac-10 fan.
Sure.
I have some West Coast ties. One thing I've noticed about it, it's always been an offensive conference. We've known that. Quarterbacks come out. Always been
when we were kids, except for when USC was good.
No. I will say it has always been that way, Emil, that yes, it's an offensive conference, but the team that usually rises to the top of that conference is the team that has a defensive element to them.
Yeah.
On the flip side, the SEC has always been known as a defensive conference. The team that rises to the top is a team that could pull out and have some offense
Right.
to that too.
Right.
And in a year where this turns out the Pac-12 is as competitive as it's, probably ever been, I'm just concerned that USC's not going to be able to bring enough defense to the table to seal the deal. Perhaps after all this that's been going on publicly, some changes are made at USC. I don't know what those changes would be. This is the same team that let Tulane run up and down the field at the end of last year. But
I mean, what you hope as a fan, or even as a college football fan, if I didn't like USC, I think Lincoln Riley has some elements of the potential to be an all-time great coach. I hope he has a mentor in the profession that we're not privy to, that says, hey, listen, you're really got things going. You're a great offensive coach, but here's some things you might want to consider if you want to take this to the next level. Or else you're going to find yourself in a situation like he was at Oklahoma, where he's losing a college semifinal to Georgia 54-48.
Yeah, absolutely insane. And, if there's a situation where you just couldn't outscore a team. All right, let's jump into the college football picks.
Should we recap?
We shall recap because it's a good recap, and we can kind of talk about maybe some big games that there's a couple, and then we can roll into the NFL stuff.
Well, first of all, your college season is amazing.
It's going rather well.
Chad, you were 3-0 last week. You're 13-2. That's not you heard that right, folks. He's 13-2 on the season. He came at you early and started your weekend off the right way on Friday night. He gave you Oregon State -3.5. They had a dominant performance against Utah. They beat them 21-7.
They did. I was impressed with Oregon State right now.
And then you had NC State, which really was dominant for a chunk of that game. They were up 10-0 into the third quarter, and you were getting 3.5. They won the game. They lost the game 13-10, but they were never outside the number. So you had 2 quick winners there. Great pick on Clemson. You read the tea leaves right there. They were pissed off, and they went up to Syracuse and they took.
They couldn't go 2-3, Emil. Just no way they could do it. No way.
They won by 17. So you were 3-0. I was 3-0 as well. I'm 8-7 on the year. I'm above the Mendoza line. We gave you a 6-0 college week. I gave you Colorado. I didn't think it would get as close as it did at the end with an onside kick, but I kind of had have a good pulse on USC, and I felt this would be a game where they started fast. They understood they didn't want the home crowd in it, and I kind of felt like I know their defense. They'll score against Colorado and then they'll relax. Now, I didn't think it'd get down to an onside kick with a minute left, but they got 21.5 points.
Hey, Colorado, they're fighters, man, if they're nothing
They're
else.
fighters. I gave you Arizona State plus 12.5. I think that young coach there, he's 34 years old. He's on to something. They went on the road. They played Cal really tough, 24-21 loss. You got 12.5. That was an easy one. And then finally, usually before the Red River game, I stay away from Oklahoma and Texas games, but I really have seen Iowa State this year, and they're down. And I felt like there's no way they're hanging within
I thought in
19.
that situation, Emil, it was a good pick on Oklahoma because they weren't that last year. And usually in those situations, those teams need to come in with a certain amount of confidence, and they try to get it the week beforehand. So that was a solid pick.
Yes, so I was 3-0, so I'm 8-7. How about we do this? I'll give you mine in this one. You go second. In the NFL, you'll go first when we go.
Have at it, my friend. Uninterrupted.
Okay, I'm not missing the big game this week. I got Oklahoma, Texas picked. The line is 6.5 at Bovada. I'm on Oklahoma plus 6.5 here. Texas has struggled in some spots this year, and it's been masked by the final score. So, in other words, they did the opposite of what a USC did this week, where USC made the score look closer than the game by playing poorly. Texas played Wyoming. They were in a slugfest with them. It was at Texas, 10-10. And then they scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter and won 31-10. So you just read the score. They killed Wyoming. No, they didn't. And I think this is a spot where you're asking them to beat their arch rival by a pretty big number. And I think that number is going to piss off Oklahoma. As you said, last year was a really bad year. I don't know, what were they, 4-8, I think. They're playing this season with a chip on their shoulder. It's a rivalry game. They come in. Texas is the number 3 team in the country. I won't be surprised if Oklahoma wins this game outright.
Carrying on, what's the next one you got?
Next one, here's a situation. This is a total situation pick. Louisville played last Thursday, so they got some extra rest. They won that game at NC State. They're obviously a defensive football team, as is Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is in the third leg of what is a really tough stretch of games. They lost that brutal game to Ohio State. As bad as the loss was at the end against Ohio State, they won in a similar fashion last week at Duke, converting a 4th and 16 down 14-13. Another defensive battle. They won 21-14. I think it's a big ask. Notre Dame goes on the road again against an undefeated Louisville team, and they have USC on deck next week, which should be a top 10 matchup. Between the lack of focus and lack of maybe some energy here, I think this game is just like last week's game. It comes down to the very end. I see a 3-4 point game here. I'm getting Louisville plus 6.5 at home. I'm taking them.
Louisville 6.5. What do you got next?
And then finally, we spent the first part of the show, or at least, well, I did, and you did too, beating up on USC. And I'm taking USC this week, minus 21.5. And I'll tell you why. If that doesn't piss them off after everything that's been said this past week, after a win, by the way, they're listening to this, and they're ranked in the top 10. If that doesn't piss them off, then there's something wrong with this team. I think they're going to get in the Coliseum after 2 straight road games, and I wouldn't want to be Arizona. Like, this to me feels like USC is going to hang 56 points on them.
All right. You're trusting that defense you just whipped up on.
Well, I'm trusting them to give up less than 35. How's that? I just said USC is going to score 56.
Yes. Whatever problem we can't solve, we will use it by, outscoring someone. All right. Great picks there by you. Oklahoma plus 6.5, Louisville plus 6.5, USC laying the major wood minus 21.5.
21.5.
Yes. And pause for all of those out there that know what I'm talking about. All right, I'm going to run through my college football picks real quick at the end. You can correct me on any lines that I might be using here. I'm going to start off in the Big 12 where I've been successful this year. Basically, I've been successful this year in any game outside of the SEC and any game where I picked against Dion, and those are the only 2 losses that I've had. Anyway, I'm going to go with Texas Tech. Baylor did the amazing thing last week against UCF. I think they're going to be worn out coming into this game. I expected more out of Baylor this year. They're not that. They're a 2-3 football team that's had all kind of problems defensively that I did not anticipate. This is that same team. Fourth quarter of last week aside, I just don't think they're going to be able to have enough energy for a Texas Tech team that's 2-3, but is much better than their record shows. It's time for Texas Tech to start doing what it is they're supposed to be doing. I've watched them play. They're the better team. I'm going to take them -1.5 here. I'm going to go to the Big Ten. Iowa. They were good for me last week. I'm going to get back on with Iowa again. They're taking on a Purdue team that is sitting below the Mendoza line. And yes, Iowa can't be accused of having a great offense. No one can make that accusation and have it stick. However, at 2.5 is what they're being asked to cover here at home. They don't have to be spectacular offensively. No. Purdue's coming into this game off of a big blowout win over Illinois. Quite unexpected. I think they're going to be a little too giddy for that. This is the same team that lost to Wisconsin by 21, to Syracuse by 15, and they also lost to Fresno State, who's good, by the way, but certainly not a Big Ten football team. I'm going to take Iowa 2.5. I'm going to go now. I've not touched the Colorado football game on since opening day when Deion pulled off the miracle and asked everyone, "You believe now?" Well, I believe this week. For sure, I like them off of the back-to-back losses to get back into the win column. I can't see this team with the way they move. All right, I was thoroughly impressed with what they were able to do in the second half. We can talk about USC's defense or whatever. They could have easily laid down and said, hey, this looks like it looked last week. We're just not in this league yet, and they could have fell back. They didn't. And that's the kind of stuff that will get you a win against a 1-4 Arizona State team who you wisely picked last week. I just don't think they're ready now to take on a Colorado type.
Well, I think they may be gassed. I like your pick here for the simple reason. I think Arizona State put out a great effort against USC, goes on the road, puts out max effort to almost beat Cal in a road upset. And now they're asked to come home and play kind of a pissed off Colorado team.
A pissed off Colorado team with firepower and playmakers that they're dying to unleash. Arizona State's lost 4 in a row. I can't see them coming off the schneid against Colorado, who is a 3.5-point favorite. All right, Emil, that's what I've got. Did I get all the lines?
So, yeah, I got Colorado at 4 for you, but I've got Chad's giving you Texas Tech -1.5, Iowa -2.5, and Colorado -4.
I'm cool with the 4. I think Colorado wins the game by double digits. I could see a 38-28 type of deal or something of that ilk.
Let me ask you this. What are you thinking, just as an opinion? You know, there's a pretty big game in the SEC West this week. Alabama, I believe, has been installed as a 2.5-point favorite. They're going down to College Station. Texas A&M's only loss was against your Hurricanes. What do you see here? If you had a
well, I hate to tell folks this, all right? You know, maybe people out there who are some Bama haters, and there should be Bama haters out there. There've been a lot of people who have suffered trauma at the hands of Roll Tide and Nick Saban for over a decade now. So I totally get there being haters out there. But for all you haters out there that thought this was it, guess what, folks? Alabama is the best team in the SEC right now. Yes, you heard me right. Better than Georgia, who has struggled in just about every worthy game that they've played, any kind of an opponent that they've come up against. I don't know what that was LSU rolled out there for a defense last week against.
That was bad.
We already saw what Alabama did to Ole Miss. So I don't know who we trust in the West outside of Alabama. On the East side, Tennessee is a pumpkin. Florida is getting trounced by Kentucky and beaten for the 3rd time since Eisenhower was, in office. So when you sit here and look at the SEC in totality, Alabama's the best football team, and they've got a score kind of settled with Texas A&M. Things are better. Well, and I don't trust Texas A&M, Emil.
Well, yes, the Texas A&M lost their quarterback last week.
They did. I don't know if that matters a whole bunch. Jimbo's a pretty good play caller.
Yeah,
a lot with a little. I have been struck by the fact that he's not been able to get a top of the line quarterback there, but that doesn't. Well, for them, it doesn't matter on the line. Alabama's a better football team.
To your Alabama point, the old saying, when you come for the king, you best not miss.
Yes.
Kiffin had a chance to kind of bury Alabama for this season
and
at
help out
least.
the rest of the league, and he failed.
And he missed. And, as much as we spent a good 10 minutes dissecting USC, Georgia's getting a pass because they've won 2 championships. They're the opposite. They're very weak offensively.
Yeah.
Nobody's talked about,
I've
if you
talked.
watch,
I mentioned it on the show last week and
yeah,
maybe the week before, kind of letting people know this is not the Georgia team from the past. And they kind of proved that again last week. Last week was an opportunity for Georgia to say, "Hey, look, we're kind of just floating through the regular season, but here's a game. This is Auburn week now. Whether Auburn is great or on their way to a national championship, they have Cam Newton or they got Bo Nix. This is a big game." And it took to the last possession for them to get a victory. So right now, I got Georgia below Alabama. And sorry, folks, I think Alabama's the best team in the conference. And if you're the best team in the conference, you're not losing to Texas A&M. I don't trust the Aggies in this situation.
I got one more I want to ask you before we head over to the NFL. There's a game that is on paper a sneaky good game, right? Ohio State's 5-0. Maryland's coming in at 5-0. Now
Best, I think Maryland can scare Ohio State, and they probably will. Maryland has done well for themselves against the big boys the last couple of years. I don't remember the score from last year. It might have ended
No,
up.
they did well against Michigan last year. Usually, Maryland, for some reason, if you go back and look at their scores, Ohio State does them good.
Yeah, I think they got something for Ohio State this year. Because I think Ohio State has who does Ohio State have the next week?
They don't have Penn State. Penn State's on a bye, then they play Massachusetts and then Ohio State. So I think you're thinking of the Penn State game, but the Penn State game is the 3rd week of October.
They're
so
at
I don't
Purdue,
really,
so nothing to look ahead
yeah.
to there. I think Maryland hangs around. And the odds makers think so too, because the number is 20 at home. And that's not, that number
No,
in years past has been 4 touchdowns plus. Ultimately, Ohio State's going to make, more plays than Maryland, and they may come close to that number. If
I wouldn't play this game. You know what? I actually think this is one of those games where the number is going to be pretty close. Like this game feels like to me
42-21, 42-21, or
something like that's going to be
41.
right. I think it's one of those games where it's really tight on the number.
Yeah, I could see well, no, they don't do this in college football. Like what Mahomes did against the Jets, just go out of bounds and not get the points. They don't do that in college football.
No, they don't do that.
But anyway, yeah, I think the number is just right. And when it, I was looking at the games this week and it said 20, I was like, yeah, that's probably about right.
That's a good segue since we're sliding over to the NFL. I want to talk a little bit about real football versus the gambling aspect. And what Mahomes did, fans get angry. That's 100% the right thing to do. The only way you can lose that game is by giving the ball back to their team. Case in point, it happened in the same week. The Eagles are in field goal range against the Commanders, formerly known as the Redskins. It's 24-all. There's a minute and a half left in the game. The right call for me with a good kicker, they're on the 22-yard line or something. 2 runs up the middle. Washington's out of timeouts. I run it down. 27-24. Thanks for playing. Okay. They throw a touchdown pass to A.J. Brown. I was sitting with my son-in-law. I said, it might not matter, but that's really stupid.
Listen, anything can happen in this game.
Yes.
Team could go down there really fast,
and they did.
Get a lucky play, score, get an onside kick, and now you've got a football game.
They went down the field in a minute and a half, scored on the last play of the game, and then I was equally shocked. Ron Rivera, I told you, 31-30. I'm on the road. I'm a 9-point underdog. On paper, I'm not the better team. I've got 2 yards. I'm going for the win.
That's the defensive mindset coach there. If it's an offensive guy, they go for it. Unless your name's Brandon Staley, who's a defensive guy that.
But you know what I'm saying. At that point, I've got control in my hands. And win or lose, I get to decide what I'm going to do.
I have the ball. I have the ball.
Once I kick the extra, I don't know who's going to win the coin toss. I don't know if my defense is going to hold. I'm going for the win.
Emil, I continue to be amazed how 2-minute drills are mishandled in the NFL. Situations like that are mishandled in the NFL. For God's sakes, there's enough money in an organization to pay a guy simply to just do that job. Hey, what's our best move here? Should we go for
you're right on the 2-minute drill, but I don't think, you know what I think that's about? I really believe this. Ron Rivera's been a lot around the game. He's old school. He's been around enough pressers. he knows if he kicks the extra, whatever the final ends up, he doesn't necessarily have to answer for that. In other words, I kicked the extra. We went to overtime. If you go for it, if you don't make it, you're going to spend 20 minutes in your presser trying to explain why you went for it. And I think a lot of these old
Maybe if
school
you have,
guys,
maybe if you have some real strong job security, you make that move. I don't know how secure Ron
yeah.
Rivera feels there. I mean, his new ownership, they may want someone else. Who the heck knows? A lot goes into those situations, as I've tried to tell people when it comes to coaching. To you sitting on your couch at home, it seems very simple. But some of those decisions that are made there are a lot of factors that come into mind. There's things that's happened during the week. There's the health of players that you may or may not know about. There's stuff that has happened during the week in terms of practice where a player didn't execute a play all week or couldn't run a coverage all week, that plays into your mind.
And you may just not have a good, I mean, in other words, it's funny to say this, but down in that compact area, you got to have something that you feel really good about. And there may not be a play you feel really good
There may
about.
not be, and I'm got a quarterback I'm kind of working with. You know what I mean? He's coming around, but he's not lights out. So yeah, I understand that move. I wasn't really saying hire a guy for situations like that. I'm talking about 2 minute or the situation where the Eagles go ahead and score when they should have stayed in
Yeah,
bounds.
oh, well, that was,
It's amazing
but
how
that,
a Chiefs are able to get that right. A team that goes to the Super Bowl and
but the
other.
Eagles is on, to me, that's one of your, like you always say, the coach has the headset. To me, that's on Sirianni to say, hey, whoa, 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 we're not throwing the ball here.
I do math here. Football is math. All right. Let's get into, first of all, let's talk about our picks with, I don't know how much time we're going to have remaining.
Well, you kind of let the horse out of the barn. Chad had one loss last week. We talked about that early in the show. He took Green Bay on Thursday night, but he finished the week strong. Tennessee outright winner plus 2.5. He had my Cowboys giving
I
six
had
and a
two
half to the
strong blowout
Patriots.
winners there.
Yes.
By the way,
So
that was Donnie Two Times pick. He's not going to be with
and
us
he did a
today.
nice job with it. You tell him he's welcome back anytime. You're 2-1. You're 8-4 on the year. You're killing it in college too. For those of you who can't add, he's 21-6. That's pretty good overall. And I was 3-0. That pushes my record to 7-5 in pros. I had the Bills -3.
Look
I
at you
kind of
above the
felt,
Mendoza line.
yeah, I kind of felt the Dolphins were just due.
No,
When you
great pick.
hang 70, your head gets a little big.
Yeah, great pick.
I had the Cowboys also, and I went against your team there. I had the 49ers giving 14 to the Cardinals, and they didn't dominate it. They covered it. I mean, it was close for a while. So
I felt like they dominated. They had a little period there where, the Cardinals are kind of like Colorado. They'll go out there and fight you every week.
So we are on to your picks. Hit us with them.
All right. Gonna give this to you super fast. You can correct me, Emil, on any lines that, I might have had off,
Okay.
As a sponsor, Bovada, every now and then, and I didn't really look back after my initial picks here. All right. So here's what I'm going with. The Atlanta Falcons, they return home. They've been a little bit of a mystery for me this season, but as we've gone along here, things are starting to clear up. They're a pretty good football team that can prosper in situations where we don't take the fish out of the water. They're at home against a Houston team that is coming around. They've got a nice little rookie quarterback. They're coming around, but they're not ready to make that leap yet. They got their win last week. They've gotten all their kudos. I think they're going to get after the rookie quarterback this week. Atlanta coming home after back-to-back losses cannot come home and lose to Houston and their rookie quarterback, or their season's going to be in the toilet. They need only to win this game. The number is 1.5. I'm going to back the Falcons in this one. Pittsburgh,
Okay.
The Pittsburgh Steelers did not look good at all last week. They lost to the aforementioned Houston Texans and their rookie quarterback, who sliced them and diced them. There's no way Pittsburgh is a good football team that anyone should pick at all at any time. They've been blown out by San Francisco. They got beat by Houston. The quarterback is gimpy. Give me Pittsburgh in this battle against the Baltimore Ravens. We know black and blue division. This is a good way for Pittsburgh to get back on. The Ravens come into this game off of a blowout win on the road against Cleveland. All the money is going to go on the Ravens. And when all the money's going one way, I'm going to go the other way. Pittsburgh has pride. They play defense. I think they can cover their rear ends at home as an underdog to the Ravens. That's going to have them incensed. And now
they're getting 4 in that game, by the way. And honestly, that's a solid pick. If you look at the history of the series, these games almost always end up 3 points.
Absolutely. I'll take the 4. The big game in the big one. The big one on Sunday night has got the Cowboys against the 49ers, old rivals. We can go really deep into this one, but I won't. I'll stick to what we've got going on this year. In successive weeks, I've watched both of these teams play against my son's team, Arizona, and I've come away with the impression that right now San Francisco is a better, more well-oiled machine, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I don't know if Brock Purdy is, a big-time quarterback. What I do know is right now, Emil, he's the best guy for that offense. That guy executes that offense. He knows where the reads are. He gets the ball out of his hand. He takes care of the football. If you get the ball to 23, really good things are going to happen. But outside of that, you've got a couple of wide receivers and a tight end to do good work for you. And Emil, I've watched the All-22 several times on San Francisco. By golly, man, they get after you on defense. And where the Cowboys do the same defensively, I am a little worried about them offensively coming into this game. I don't think they're running the football this year the way, or at least early on, that I hope they would run the football. That creates problems for them in the passing game. And really right now it's, you get some Gallup, but they're over-reliant on CeeDee Lamb, I think, right now, and I think he could be taken out of the game plan. So right now, I just think the better-oiled machine is San Francisco. I think they'll win this game, and 3.5, I think, is the number. Is not
3.5's the number.
Yeah, I can, to be honest, right now, I see like a 30-20, 31-20 win for San Francisco here. Maybe the Cowboys get them later in the year, but this game at home, I like the 49ers. Give them.
Chad's giving you the Falcons -1.5. He's giving you Steelers +4, and he's crapping all over my Cowboys, taking the 49ers, giving 3.5. Okay, you're hot.
What can I say, my friend?
I'll make it simple here. I'm going to start off with the London Jaguars, okay?
Yes, might as well. 2 weeks in a row?
2 weeks in a row, and, I think there's obviously an advantage, right? 2 weeks in a row there. Buffalo coming off a huge division win against Miami. The money will probably roll to Buffalo because they, 48-20. I think this ends up being a tight ball game. It wouldn't even surprise me if the Jags somehow pulled an upset here. But I'm getting 5.5 points. That's a lot in the NFL. This isn't college. I don't need them to win the game. I just need them to be competitive, and I think the Jags will be competitive. I'm going to go for low-hanging fruit here. I usually feel like stuff like this is a trap, but after what I watched, number one, Monday night, and then I got a team coming off an embarrassing 4-touchdown loss, and it's a good football team. I think the Miami Dolphins are going to add to the Giants' misery on Sunday. They're giving 10.5. I usually am not real excited about laying double digits in an NFL game, but the way the Dolphins play offense, coming off a 20-point performance, which is poor for them, this feels like one of those games it might be 41-10. I mean, I just think Miami puts it on the Giants this week.
Absolutely.
And finally, I'm going to go on a limb here. I don't know about you and how much Eagles football you watch. The Eagles are 4-0. They very well may be the only undefeated team in the NFL by the end of the week. If Dallas were to upset San Francisco, they could be. But I don't like what I'm seeing in terms of they don't look like a dominant football team. They're not the team they were last year, at least not yet. They're getting by. And now, after getting by at home in overtime against the Redskins, they're going to play a Rams team that's surprising us. I mean, the Rams are better than at least I thought they'd be. And they're getting 4.5 at home. That's a tough trip across the country for the Eagles in a game. I don't know how seriously they'll take the Rams because they may be thinking just like I am, like, hey, the Rams weren't good coming in this year. I think the Rams hang with them in this game. Somebody wins it by a field goal at the end. I don't care who it is because I'm getting 4.5.
Yeah, so summarizing, the London Jaguars +5.5.
That's right.
The Miami Dolphins, wounded Miami Dolphins, laying 10.5 against a more wounded New York Giants football team. and then the Rams catching 4.5 at home. We had a discussion at the top of this show about the best, the offensive lines. I'm going to tell you something because I've made it a point to watch all of the NFL games each week. I don't know if I'm going to say they're the best, but the most overachieving line right now is that Los Angeles Rams offensive line right now. They don't have major names there, but when I'm watching them every week, Stafford is getting pretty good protection, and it has allowed him to distribute that football and throw it to the Hawaiian Puka Nacua.
Yeah.
And he's just racking up catches. I
Well,
think
let's be
that's a big
honest.
part of their success.
McVay's a good coach, and I think the problems they had last year up front were horrible. So I think he probably prioritized that in the offseason. It sounds like you're impressed with what he's put together so far.
Absolutely. That's the one thing that really, outside of that kid, Nakua, doing what he does and getting open and getting catches. By the way, Cooper Kupp comes back this week. So it'd be interesting to see that dynamic as both of them
This
come
feels
together.
like it just feels like one of those really, it feels like a tricky game, the same way the Cardinals were a tricky game for the Cowboys because they lost Diggs early in the week. These are human beings in that game.
It would have been nice if the odds makers would have thrown a little more cheese on that pizza, maybe 6. But I feel you. This could very well be a field goal game, and you get 4.5. But kudos to the Rams offensive line and what they're doing right now. And then now they get a really key piece to their offense coming back. So a lot of good things to look forward to here. I happen to have a pick on the big game, so I think we're good there. I don't know what you want to say about the Jets. I will say this on the way going out here. I was impressed with Zach Wilson. Yes, ultimately, poor guy. Maybe he needs to go to church or whatever, bobble the ball around at the end, and it led to the loss. But the way he was criticized during the week and responded for the most part that's another team that could have laid down. You're down 17-0. Were they 20-0 or whatever?
No, and you know what? We didn't spend enough time on it, and maybe we will. I'm sure something will happen Sunday that gets me back on this, but I am sick and tired of inconsistency with these calls, especially it seems in Kansas City games where all of a sudden it seems like all the refs look and go, oh, that's incomplete. They're going to have to punt. Oh, I got a flag.
It hurts the integrity of the game. There's already people. It started off as a joke, but now it's like a wide going thing about the NFL is fixed. And it doesn't help those kind of calls when.
No, it's not fixed. It's just these guys making calls. I mean, I don't know if they feel the pressure, but like if you want to call that has to be the same call in the first quarter and the fourth quarter. If you're not going to let them play, then I should see lots of interference and holding all game. If I don't see it all game and all of a sudden you bring one out that's not obvious, I mean, there was nothing obvious to me there.
I'll continue to rail against pass interference. It's the biggest play, and it's also the biggest BS in the NFL because you can just chuck the ball downfield and get yourself a 40, 50-yard penalty for some kind of obscure contact or whatever that referee there feels it is. I just think it's too punitive. We need to go back to a 15-yard penalty. And let's have some consistency there. I understand the game moves fast now. I at least have some reverence for that. If a fan can get close down just one day in their life, get on a sideline during a game, you will understand what it is a ref has to deal with, but just pass interference is too punitive for me.
I'm with you. Well, there's a lot of good games this weekend. We're in week 6 of the college season, week 5 of the NFL season. A lot of good football. So enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Enjoy it. We appreciate you guys stepping in here with us and watching another episode of the Two Chumps podcast. And I appreciate the growth that we have going on. And we love entertaining you guys. So on your way out, if you've not done it already, go ahead and subscribe, whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on Anchor, Apple, Amazon, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us. Go ahead and give us a subscribe. Hey, man, and if you really feel like it, go ahead and share this on one of your social media outlets. We know all of you have a whole bunch of them. That's it for us. We're going to see you guys next week. For Emil Chad, I'm Chad Wilson. Thanks for watching the Two Chumps Football Podcast. See you guys next week.